Welcome back to my channel, and it is now time for the top 10 NFL teams going into Week 5. To start it off at number 10 is the Los Angeles Rams. So going into the year, no one thought they would be good, and they have been very surprising. For fantasy football, they have some big surprises with Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, and the running back Williams, and they all were waiver wire pickups who have been excellent. Matthew Stafford, who some people thought would retire, has returned to his former self and has looked very good, honestly. They are 2-2 with losses to the Bengals, which is a bad loss, and to the 49ers, which is a good loss. And to be in the top 10, you have to have some of those quality losses on your schedule. But they were able to beat the Colts, although it was in overtime, and the Seahawks in Week 1. And just watching their games, I've been very impressed. Their defense with Aaron Donald has returned to form, and their offense has looked very good. And with Cooper Kupp coming back potentially next week or maybe in a few weeks, their offense could become one of the best in the NFL. Now, not as good as the Dolphins' offense, of course, but they could be very good. Then at number 9, we have the Baltimore Ravens. They are 3-1, and this week was their best week of the season. They made the Browns' defense look bad. They scored 28 points and held the Browns to 3. I'm not giving them a bunch of credit for holding them to 3 because they did have a rookie quarterback playing, and of course they lost Chubb. So the Browns' offense is terrible. But the Browns' defense going into the week was the best defense in the NFL. And being able to score 28 points on them is no small feat. Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and the rookie Flowers look like they're clicking, and they're starting to roll. And who knows, before we know it, they might run away with this division. If they beat the Steelers, then they'll have a big lead on everybody. The Bengals look terrible. The Browns fell apart this week, and the Steelers' offense is something. But the Ravens look to have a strong hold on the division as long as they can win this week. And if Lamar is playing as well as Lamar can, he's an MVP type player. As long as they can recover from some injuries they had earlier in the season, who knows, they could even be a Super Bowl threat. Then at number 8, we have the Seattle Seahawks. So they put quite the pounding on the New York Jets. They had 11 sacks, and they just destroyed them. The Giants scored 3 points in the entire game. Daniel Jones almost led them down the field to score and then threw a pick 6. And if the Seahawks defense can look average, the Seahawks offense will bring them to a ton of wins. They did lose in Week 1 to the Rams, but since then, over the previous 3 weeks, they've looked very good, including a big win over the Lions, who everybody loves. And then speaking of the Lions, up next at number 7 is the Detroit Lions. So yes, I know they lost to the Seahawks and they're above the Seahawks, but that's just how it's going to go. It's my list and I'm going to keep it that way. So the Lions smacked the Packers. It wasn't close at all. Their defensive line is still looking very good. Their run game still very good, even though Gibbs didn't really do anything. So that's hurt my fantasy team, but running game overall still very impressive. Goff showing that he's still a good quarterback in the NFL, and stacking up some wins over the division. They can pull away. They're in a pretty weak division with the Packers as their best competition and easy wins over the Vikings and the Bears. So they could potentially stack a bunch of wins, go on a really hot streak, and then get the number 1 seed in the NFC and then have a straight shot at the Super Bowl. Of course, that would take Goff playing very well throughout the year, but it could happen. I mean, Goff's made the Super Bowl before. Up next at number 6 is the Miami Dolphins. I know they won by 50 points 2 weeks ago in Week 3, but in Week 4, of course, they lost by 28 to the Bills. So it was 20-48. A loss like that is going to drop you in my rankings. If you do look back at all the previous teams that had scored 70 points, all of them had lost the next week. So this was kind of expected, but I was expecting a close loss to the Bills, and it was a blowout. Their defense looked very weak, and really every time the Dolphins have played against an okay offense, they've given up a ton of points, and this is very concerning. So if their defense can't stop them, your offense does need to put up that 50 points that they did earlier. But with the stable of good running backs, Tyreek Hill, Waddle, and Tua all looking decent, their offense is the best in the NFL, so they just have to be able to outscore teams. And I think they can, most of the time. Up next at number 5 is the Dallas Cowboys. So I know some people might call me a hater for not having them higher up, but 5 is a solid ranking. As of now, they probably are the best defense in the NFL. Last week I'd say it was the Browns, but they fell apart. So now I would say it's the Cowboys. And their defense has not only stopped teams like the Patriots, the Jets, the Giants, but they've made plays and scored themselves. I do have to take some points away from them because they just haven't played good teams, but you play who's on the schedule. So they are, great, and they're scary. They're easily a top 3 NFC team. I am a little concerned about their offense because it hasn't done much this year, although it hasn't had to do much. So can you blame an offense for not doing great when you've won several games by 30 points? Not really, but I just haven't been impressed enough by Dak Prescott to put him higher than number 5. Up next at number 4 is the Kansas City Chiefs. They get the bonus of having Patrick Mahomes, best player in the NFL. So that's just like a bam, you're up there. I know they did just have a bad game, but that's against the Jets with a solid defense. And everyone was talking about penalties that went against the Jets, but there were also bad penalty calls that went against the Chiefs, such as the penalty that caused a safety that clearly took place outside of the end zone and somehow still got called a safety. So it went both ways. And even though the Jets were screwed a bit, the Chiefs did find a way to win, and you have to give them some credit for that, winning even though Patrick Mahomes has his worst game in years. And that's through finding a running game, which could help them going forward. It is a bit concerning that Zach Wilson looked okay against their defense, but, I'm willing to look past that when you have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Up next at number 3 is the Philadelphia Eagles. So Jalen Hurts finally, I would say, looked almost as good as he did last year. Through the first 3 weeks, the Eagles had won against bad teams, and they hadn't been blowing them out. They had just been finding ways to win, which has some upsides and some downsides. I guess probably more downsides because, you should be blowing them out. But in this week against Washington, who always plays as tough, Jalen threw 2 touchdowns to A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown had almost 200 receiving yards. And even though it went into overtime, I wasn't ever really concerned about losing watching the game. And if Jalen can keep it up in combination with this elite running game, they're a pretty scary offense who can do anything. Of course, the defense worries me. The defensive line with Jalen Carter and the rest of them is probably the best defensive line in the NFL. But the back 7 is really suspect. There's no depth, and we've already had injuries pile up. So I'm concerned about good quarterbacks picking us apart. And even this week, I think the Rams have a decent chance to beat the Eagles. But the Eagles are one of 2 undefeated teams, and they've just found ways to win, and I think that's worthy of being a top 3 team. Up next is the Buffalo Bills at number 2. The Bills smacked the Dolphins that I just talked about earlier as an elite offense, and they held them to 20 points. Like that's very good. And of course, the Bills offense itself scored 48. So since they played the Jets, the Bills have blown out 3 teams, including the Dolphins, who are very good. So when you blow out a very good team, that means you're very good. And if the Bills played any of the teams I have ranked beneath them, I would pick the Bills to win. And then number 1 is the San Francisco 49ers. They have looked absolutely dominating this whole year. The Cardinals did play them a little closer than what the score is. The 49ers just look so complete. The run game is awesome. Purdy is great. Ayuk had a good game. Even with Kittle and Deebo Samuel doing nothing, they still scored 35 points. And their team is just so well built. It's hard to see anybody beating them right now. Of course, this week they do play the Dallas Cowboys, and we may have a new number one next week. Or the 49ers might win and stay on top for a while. But anyways, thanks for watching the video. Please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting down below, and I'll see you later.